welcome to episode 249 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Lydia Creech,
Nathan Smith.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies that we saw this week in part one. And in part two, we will be concluding our quick Patreon pick series with 1942's King's Row, which was picked by Maggie, another lovely Patreon patron. And we appreciate all of you. And if you have not, patronized us on Patreon, we're going to have some fun stuff coming up. I can't. Patreon patron is like, it's like Peter Piper picked a patch of pickled peppers.
You're doing great.
Which I said much clearer than Patreon patron. But if you've not, we have some cool stuff coming up. We're going to talk about it at the end of the podcast since we're going to be recording an episode for the Patreon page afterwards. So stick around if you have not joined. We have some fun stuff happening on that. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Lydia, I'm going to kick it off with some new releases that you and I both saw this past week. The first one seems to be the very popular movie that I guess not many people saw in theaters, but has gained some traction as a popular Twitter internet movie, and that is Booksmart, which is the directorial debut of Olivia Wilde. It stars Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein, among many other actors, including Jason Sudeikis, Diana Silvers, and Billy Lord. And yeah, Billy Lord. And Paige wrote about it on the site a couple weeks ago because she got caught it in an advanced screening. But pretty much the movie follows these two teenagers who are about to graduate from high school. They've been very academically focused, and on the eve of their graduation, they decide that, well, we should, work less and play a little bit more, and are determined to go to the big party that's happening the night before graduation. And the movie follows their journey to that party. Lydia, you were, if for those who don't follow you on Letterboxd, you generally do not give star ratings to stuff. You usually will give like a heart or just nothing at all. And I laughed because I saw when you watched Booksmart that you gave it 5 stars. So I knew that this must enter this astronomical plane of appreciation for this movie. So I'm curious what you made of Booksmart and what made you give it a rating.
It was really, really funny the whole way through, and my theater was pretty packed. I don't know what the deal was. I didn't know that it wasn't doing well at the box office based on my theater going experience. And there was laughter.
That's good, though.
Consistently the whole way through. And I also really, really like movies about best friends, because I don't feel like there are enough of those. And there's something very special, I think, about that period, like your high school best friend when you're a girl. They're pretty weird. They're codependent, I'd say. And nobody likes them, and they kind of use that we're best friends because nobody likes us, and also we're better than everybody. So I related, which is maybe bad.
I really enjoyed the I heard it described on another podcast, but they're it was almost a battle of compliments when they would just start start assaulting each other with these compliments. It was very endearing, because instead of a throwdown of insults, it was just you're so beautiful, you have no idea, and she's like, thank you, you too, and it just went on like that for a minute.
It's endearing because they're all wrapped up in each other, not in a romantic way. It's just this very specific girl best friend way. And it felt really true. I don't know if Olivia Wilde had a best friend like that, or I think the script has been around a bit, different writers. But they captured something, I think.
There was that's just one thing I want to mention. There's 4 writers on this. And it was great, all women, but it shouldn't take 4 people to write this movie anyway. It's a whole digression. But one of the things that I think a lot of people have been talking about with this movie is the director's, the director vision that Olivia Wilde brings. It can be very, visually appealing, and the way that she captures the kind of nonstop wittiness of it. I mean, what did you make of her directing style?
There's a couple of little fantasy sequences that are not fantasy sequence. One of them's like this really gorgeous underwater pool shot that's ethereal. I don't know if that's a good word. It's at a dumb teen party, but it's ethereal. But there's another shot that also made me laugh really hard, but I think was directed well, is this fantasy that Amy, I think is the character's name.
Yeah, the Beanie Feldstein character.
The Beanie Feldstein's character. Like when she enters the party, I think for the first, it's like this weird musical, like musical number. It goes like for a whole bit and it's a little awkward and then it keeps going. So you're still laughing, but it's well done. It's just...
Well, it's almost like mocking the because they would have those moments in like something like La La Land where they would just like break into this like, you know, unrealistic dance number, and it's something like that. So it feels like you were in this you know, La La Land-esque movie musical, and it's like, no, it's just this, she's excited because her crush is here.
So I really liked those sort of touches, and I will also say I'm into, like, it's funny the whole way through, but I think she also does land on really emotional weird moments. Like they have a big blow up fight, like that. I don't think that's a spoiler because that's kind of like you're waiting for it to happen the whole movie because it's and I liked the touch. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't spoil it. Anyway, that's handled really well. And then when they're like saying at the end of the movie, kind of wrapping everything up, I thought that was like really emotionally well done too.
I like how it ends on like this kind of accelerated note, rather because the scene before is much more somber and like you know, the one character is going away for a year and the other one's staying back, and
I was thinking of like fucking Lady Bird. Like,
yeah, and
you have the mom like crying in the car, and it's not quite that.
No, it doesn't leave you on like this kind of somber note. It leaves you on, because after she leaves and she's like the Beanie Feldstein character is like driving and kind of tearing up.
She's
and then,
gonna do it. Like she's gonna do the mom from Lady Bird, but
and then Caitlin Dever jumps in front. She's like, "I can be the last one on the plane. You want to get pancakes?" She's like, "Fuck yeah!" And then it just ends. So, I
really like that.
I enjoyed Booksmart as well. It does for having 4 people writing it. It does have great, well written moments. It's very joke heavy. You know, they're throwing a lot of great lines, especially Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein are just kind of tossing lines out on a consistent basis. I mentioned Billie Lourd at the beginning. She gives just this wonderful, you know, bizarro performance as this almost spirit-like rich girl who just keeps appearing in places. She's on a lot of drugs.
A lot of drugs.
The one thing I do want to talk about, because this was one of the takeaways I kind of had, and I was listening to the Slate Spoilers special podcast afterwards, and they had a really interesting discussion about this as well. And I'm curious to get your perspective on this, Lydia. Is this movie has a very strange concept of class in it.
Okay, Alison Willmore wrote a really good article for BuzzFeed too.
That as well. So kind of to set up a little bit of the beginning of the movie, there's this scene where these 3 characters are trashing Beanie Feldstein's character in the bathroom, and they don't realize that she's in the bathroom at the same time. And so she comes out of the stall and is like washing her hands and kind of sets up this, you know, you can say whatever you want, but you're gonna, you know, not be doing anything in life, and I'm going to Yale next year. And then it's revealed that the 3 they kind of all 3 go, well, one of them's like, I'm going to Yale, and the other one's like, I'm going to Stanford, and the other one's like, I'm going to work, you know, and get $60K to work at Google next year. And so the beginning kind of breaking moment for her character is that even though all of these other characters that she kind of thought were the underachieving, just wanted the part of the whole time, jockey kind of characters, even though they live that lifestyle, they also are going to these like prestigious universities. They're going to like Georgetown and Columbia and all these places, and that's what kind of leads to the whole, we're gonna go to this party because all we've been doing is working to achieve this, and we clearly missed out on something. But it's just this very strange, I don't know. It's like, I get that it's a movie and it's a teen movie and you have these elements of that aren't very realistic, but it just feels like it's very much in this like the most fantasy sequence of this entire thing is that you have all of these kids again,
who are all going to like Ivy League,
upper middle class, well-off kids who are going to these Ivy League schools, and I don't know, it has this whole class bubble that it never really takes the time to interrogate very much. And not saying that this movie should have done that, but at the same time, I feel like the Slate podcast did a really good job. They said that it kind of is a movie that sands off the edges of the narrative, and so there's never really any true like threat in the narrative. And I kind of feel like that. I kind of feel that way about the movie, because it's like you have this big kind of elephant in the room when it comes to class and the characters that are being portrayed in this movie, but it constantly sands the edges. But I mean, did you get any of that, or did you feel that way?
I definitely felt that way after reading Alice in Wonderland articles. The thing about Booksmart is it like really wants to imagine a high school experience that's a little bit kinder than I think it actually is, especially for girls who are like Caitlin Dever and Beanie felt like it's like it turns out her classmates really aren't so horrible. They're actually like, the jocks are nice, the theater kids are nice, and
that's another weird thing. Everybody's nice. Everybody's not nice. Yes, you in a theoretical world you would love everybody to be nice, but like even the pizza delivery guy whose car they get into, who they later learn is like a strangler, is nice to him. Like, it's weird.
It's a little bit like this fantasy thing, and part of that fantasy thing is ignoring class, because like getting into those schools, it's not like the movie is like suggesting, oh, it's a mistake that they didn't have any fun and studied all the time, but like unless you come from a certain background, you don't get into Yale. Sorry.
And that was the other thing I had a question about, is you meet Caitlin Dever's character's parents, who are played by Lisa Kudrow and Will Forte, and they kind of have this like, much more Norman Rockwell family vibe to them, even though they're very cool with her being out, and everything. But you never meet Beanie Feldstein's parent or her mom. You can tell that she definitely lives it's an apartment complex, socioeconomically, right? Lower than Caitlin Dever or any of the other students in terms of like the houses that you see throughout the movie. And it's just like, I felt like that should have been even more of an element of her character, rather than, oh, she's just this super smart, focused girl. Like, there's a reason why she's that way, rather than that's just her personality. I feel like that probably was also a factor in her being so focused.
I saw someone describe her character as like a latchkey kid. Like, she's probably left alone by herself a lot and got some sort of complex, especially going to a high school with people who are like pretty bougie, like nice houses, nice things, nice cars as teenagers. And she doesn't have a car. Like, her best friend picks her up and takes her to school every day. So it's also born out of this like, have to prove myself, have to work, and it's just like, no, that was wrong. I mean, they're cool, they're still cool. And I'm like, yeah, in this movie I really like that, but I'm still not knocking any stars off of it though, because I do not think there are enough movies about best friends. So
it's still a really charming and worthwhile movie to go check out at the movie theater. So I would recommend checking out Booksmart. The other one I wanted to talk about real quickly, Paige mentioned it last week, but John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum came out recently, and I in terms of the 3 John Wicks, I think I still like the second one maybe the most. Behind this one, I would say this is the second best. The thing I liked about this, and I've heard some people talk about it, is that you kind of shed, in terms of the John Wick mythology, you kind of shed the reasons why he's in this situation. In the first one, it's like they killed his dog and stole his car, and then the second one, it's like it kind of is a little bit of a repeat of that. And in this one, it's just they're after him. He's got to kill people, and at this point he has no like reservations about the killing. He's just like, this is just, I'm stuck in this hell. Like, this is just who I am.
And then he dives right back in. Like, yeah, I guess I live here now.
Yeah, he just dives right back in. I felt like it's a pretty lengthy one. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think it moves pretty well. I thought it, like, I had no problems with the runtime. It has some really, I think my favorite sequence was the scene in the hotel with him and Halle Berry's character, which is
and the
shot really,
yeah,
her, like the way that, well, one, Halle Berry's really remarkable in that she, like, the physicality that she shows, like, you know, next to Keanu is great, but also, yeah, you have this element of the two dogs that are jumping around and grabbing people at the same time. But I don't know, it just seemed like it was missing a little bit of something that I thought like the other one had, especially the last one had. But what did you make of John Wick 3?
Well, the thing that I noticed about John Wick 3, and the thing that gave, I think, me and Andrew a bunch of pause about John Wick 2 was this sort of tension between this underground assassin world and all of these like oblivious citizens or whatever. And like I got very concerned in the crowd scenes. Like, I think it's the Oculus, whatever that train station is. Like, I did not, like, I was like, oh, this is fun, they're really good, but like, what if a stray bullet just like murders a civilian? Fuck. But John Wick 3, I think, totally eliminates that tension, because it's just like
everybody's an assassin.
Yeah, so like the conspiracy grows, and I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about fucking anybody. They knew what they signed up for. And also, like, a bunch of the fight scenes are weirdly more isolated. Like, the first fight scene he has is like just in a library, like the stacks, so nobody's around it, and then like an antique store, and then the desert. So it's like way further into this like fantasy world building space, and I think we're losing that like commentary a little bit on violence, which is fine. If they're not fucking interested in that, don't be interested in that. But
well, it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about that they view John Wick less as like an action movie and more of like a slapstick comedy, because there are moments that like are kind of played almost like you're watching like a Keaton film, like played for a laugh. Like I'm thinking like the thing I was going to add to your point was that they almost ditch some of the gunplay to an extent in this one. Like, you have one sequence where he's fighting pretty exclusively with like axes and knives, which was kind of surreal. You also have, I mean, you mentioned the first one. He kills, shout out to Boban, the center for the Philadelphia 76ers, and he gets killed with a book. But yeah, it gets a little bit more creative in that sense. But I guess, yeah, you can view it as like a slapstick comedy, because there are just elements that are played that are kind of just absurd in the way that they're, you know, framed, and the way that Keanu reacts to them. I mean, I'm thinking of like the whole sequence near the end of the movie where he's in like the glass area and he's fighting the two guys from the raid, and they're just like, hey, we're super big fans, this is really fun. And there's like one sequence where they keep pushing him, and I swear he runs into like 5 panels of
just
glass,
like
and it's just like
over and over.
Yeah, and it's just you know, repetitive, and it just garnered a laugh in my showing, just because it was like he kept getting thrown into him. But I don't know, do you see any reading of it as like a slapstick comedy?
I actually thought it was maybe less funny than chapter 2 also, but this one did have another send up of, I think it was Buster Keaton very briefly in Times Square. Is that where he is? I don't know where he is. Very brief shot. And also, I don't think he says more than like 40 words. Like, the John Wick character just keeps talking less and less and less, like really leaning into like basically being silent.
Yeah, which is fine, because I think that a lot of what people a lot of what people are impressed with in terms, because I saw somebody who had this thread going about how Keanu Reeves isn't a good actor, and I was like, well, I'm like, that's not true. Like, the thing that makes him such a great actor in terms of like the John Wick movies is that he's all doing it like physically. It's all like it's silent movie acting. You know, that's what the whole, you know, he's having to, you know, that's just how he's. And so yeah, you may read it as, oh, he's just kind of mumbling stuff, or, you know, spitting out these very trite, you know, hardly written lines, but
very trite.
But you're just like, you have those and it's kind of fun, but at the same time, most of the time he's just you're watching him kind of react and take the hits, like in that, like the way he reacts during the knives axe sequence is really because he's just having to pop different places and they're throwing these knives, and it's a very claustrophobic sequence.
That sequence was weird because I don't think it had any soundtrack behind it. All the other fight scenes did, but that one was just like the sounds of glass breaking and punches landing and like the swish of clothing.
Metal. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a thing that I'm noticing.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I was one of the. I'll be happy to check out the rest of these series.
I'm gonna watch the fourth one. I don't give a shit.
The fourth one sounds kind of interesting because I guess, spoiler alert, they set up like for the fourth one where it's.
I will not watch the TV show.
No, I won't either. But the fourth one is like set up where John Wick and the Lawrence Fishburne character are gonna just like tear down the hierarchy of this whole assassins thing, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds super fun. I'm here for that. But yeah, John Wick Chapter 3, it is in theaters now, so yeah, check it out. Lydia, real briefly, you just caught the new Godzilla movie, so give us a quick rundown on that one.
Okay, I will keep it brief. Because I don't remember a goddamn thing about the 2014 one, which this is a sequel to, apparently. Some of the characters are back, like Ken Watanabe, I think, is one of the scientists from the first one, and
Sally Hawkins.
The plot is Sally Hawkins is back, although she gets stepped on and dies like pretty early on. It's very inglorious.
Oh God.
And that's what happens, and I was just like, oh, bye. I guess. Never mind.
Well, that ruined that for me. Okay.
Yeah. But Vera Farmiga is a survivor from the 2014 attack in San Francisco, and she lost a kid, and I guess it makes her kind of weird. And so she gets this plan in her head that she's gonna wake up all the other Titans. They've discovered that there's more than just Godzilla and the other one that he fought. There's a bunch. And she's like, well, we're gonna do an extinction thing. Fuck the people, and we're gonna just turn it around and it'll be fine. Except it's not fine. Bunch of monsters. She got another kid that she changed it anyway. I mostly just wanted to watch it because I wanted to see Godzilla and Mothra and Rhoda, like the other monsters. I'm not got a huge background in Godzilla. I haven't seen most of them. I've seen the original, the 2014 one, Shin Godzilla, and this. But I don't know. I said this off mic, but I don't think Americans should be making Godzilla movies. Like, we have the budget. We can do really awesome special effects. Godzilla looks great. He's thick. He's a big boy. And the monsters look great. Like, Mothra is a moth monster. If you don't know, it gets like some really, I guess, supposed to be glamour spectacle shots. Like, her wings light up and it's very pretty. And then you're like, oh, it's the sublime, monstrous, but beautiful. Sure. Like, that's fine. It looks great. I don't think they're really handling like what Godzilla is. I don't know what cultural fear these Godzilla movies speak to. Like, they make some noise about climate change and population control and like an extinction event for humans. And I'm like, blah, 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 whatever. That's fine. I have a problem with this story because a white lady is like, oh, we're just going to wipe out a bunch of the Earth's population. You know who that means? Poor brown people. Like, sit down, lady. But again, Americans. Watch it for the monsters. I was able to see all of the action. I think there was enough monster. Like, they weren't hiding the monster because the monster looked kind of shitty. Looked great. So that's fine. Whatever happened to the King Kong crossover thing?
It's still
that
happening.
was a thing, right? That was going to happen.
It's still happening,
no?
yeah.
Well, it wasn't in this, so I don't. Oh, okay. I thought I was going to say King Kong.
Yeah, directed by Adam Wingard, I believe.
No. Okay. Well, he's not in this one, so I don't know what I.
He doesn't have an age of monsters in this scene, or at least King Kong doesn't. Cool.
Right.
All right.
So Godzilla, what are we afraid of?
So you're just like, go see Booksmart.
Yes. If you're gonna go to the movies, go see Booksmart.
Cool. Nathan, you had a movie you want to talk about?
Yeah, a semi-recent release that has, I guess, been sort of percolating for a while, did this festival circuit and recently got a theatrical release. It's the new movie from the French filmmaker Olivier Assayas, Non-Fiction. Assayas is a filmmaker who I like a good deal. I've seen maybe 7 or 8 of his movies, and like most of them, I really, really like Demon Lover, Irma Vep.
I keep meaning to see that.
Personal Shopper's pretty good. That was his most recent movie with Kristen Stewart, which is on Netflix and pretty accessible, and a lot of people may have seen that. This movie is kind of I guess sort of I don't know. It's not like a return to form, and people say that a lot of times about movies, and they're not a return to anything, or I don't know. But this is also, but it's kind of noteworthy, I guess, maybe that this is his first like French, totally in French movie since 2012, Something in the Air. The last 2 of his movies, Personal Shopper and Clouds of Sils Maria, both star Kristen Stewart and are sort of like international co-productions that are largely in English, even though they're set in Europe. So this movie is like kind of the like platonic ideal of like a French movie. I don't know. Like, I think that when like people,
that's fair.
When people who are like, oh, I don't want to watch a movie with subtitles, not to disparage anybody, but if we all know that there are people in this world who don't want to watch movies from France.
You're missing out.
And this is kind of like, I feel like your worst nightmare if you're that type of person. Like if subtitles show up and you like roll your eyes and you don't want to hear about like affairs between French intellectuals, then this is not the film for you. But luckily, a good deal of people who listen to this podcast like those kinds of movies. So maybe this is exactly what you're looking for. It's kind of a weird movie because basically it's about the publishing industry. Assayas is often sort of looking at media industries from like digital pornography and hentai and Demon Lover, to filmmaking, French filmmaking in Irma Vep, fashion and Personal Shopper. This movie is all about publishing, and it sort of takes place in a kind of slippery time. It doesn't exactly place when it is set. It seems, sort of like the contemporary moment, but basically everything that's being talked about in the movie is kind of happened a few years ago. It's basically at this sort of moment where people are very worried about the rise of ebooks, and they're super concerned that that e-readers are gonna totally overwhelm hardback and paperback, and that it's just gonna totally cease to exist within like 10 or 20 years. So that sort of anxiety is hovering over the movie. Our main character is this literary editor, Alain, who has had this long time working relationship with a novelist named Leonard, who's played by an actor who some of you may know from the movie Eden by Olivier Assayas' actually former partner Mia Hansen-Løve. In that movie, this guy played a character who was like a big defender of Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls. In this movie, he is a author of autofiction who's difficult to work with, very stubborn and opinionated, and also a little bit problematique, it seems. He has a tendency to write about his personal affairs and offend the women in his life. And then, when people at Q&As and at book readings sort of address the concerns of the women in his life and the things that they've said publicly about his books. He's sort of acts aloof and indifferent and, pretends to not know about these supposed criticisms of himself. So
he's like he's like Tarantino at Cannes.
Yeah, basically, he's just sort of like, it's like, you clearly know what you're doing, dude, but you're just like dodging these questions. This is a guy sort of this novelist Leonard, is clearly like of a different, he's not an old guy, but he's of a different generation. The world is sort of like, doesn't have a place for his sort of like male chauvinist bullshit, quite so much anymore. And Alan is sleeping with a colleague named Laura, who's much younger than him, and she is totally invested in the death of print and has totally staked her future and her career on the ascendancy of e-readers and of phones and tablets, and she is ready, willing, and able to slip a tab of cyanide to printed paper. She is just like ready to be done with books. So the whole movie is kind of dominated by discussions between this group of characters, including Alan's wife, who is having an affair with Leonard. Her name is Selena, and she is a stage actress who is on a kind of a prestige TV thriller about a hostage negotiator. So there is like a moment where you see Assayas kind of do his take on like prestige television. There's sort of like a brief like 5-minute or so scene from this show. So that's sort of funny. But she's played by Juliette Binoche, who of course is like one of the great actresses in the French language and in any language, sort of, playing somebody who may or may not be loosely based on herself as an actress, kind of like she did in their previous collaboration, Clouds of Sils Maria. So between this group of characters, this group of creative, intellectual types, sort of lefty, whatever, they're just constantly arguing and discussing and talking about the future of media and the fate of print and what's going to happen. And it's not so much like for the content of the arguments themselves. There's a lot of discussion about blogging and so a lot of this feels a little old, but it kind of like, it knows that it's not really like invested in being prescient. It's I think that Assayas is just more because of, you see this both in the focus in discourse and kind of dialectics and conversation, and also just in the focus in the publishing industry itself. He's just interested in words and in how words respond to new technology, how words kind of are shaped by emotions, the relationship between human, relationships and the language that we use. So really he's just sort of invested in kind of studying that. It's more about the shape of the language, I think, than like the words themselves. So overall, I liked this film. It's shot on Super 16 millimeter. It's like very warm, has this kind of muted color palette that's muted but rich. I think it's a very nice looking movie, and it also ends with a Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lover song, which I think is great. Assayas has like very hip 80s 90s new wave taste. I get a very like how do you do fellow kids vibe from him. But I really like Jonathan Richman, so I was happy to hear that song at the end of the movie. So overall, I liked it. Zach, I know you saw it at TIFF and seemed to like it more than me. I gave it only 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. But overall, I appreciated what it was, and I kind of appreciated the sort of slippery liminalness of the setting and the time that it's set in. It's not like quite the kind of cringy, groan-inducing movie about Twitter that I was worried about. But I just think it's sort of like, for me, it doesn't really stack up to the kind of heftiness of some of his better, more challenging movies. So. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, you're right, because I was curious to see it just because I was wondering if it was going to be like this, technology is the death of everything, this is awful, and everybody was just going to be like, apathetic by the end of the movie, and it's not really that. It's kind of, I think it treads like both lines on what is useful and what's not, and it is weird because it is like in this moment that because technology and the internet moves so quickly, it feels almost somewhat like ancient history. But
right.
I think that kind of I remember seeing an interview that SAS did, and he was fine with that. Like that's what he kind of wanted it to be like, as this kind of time capsule for that moment. So I'll be curious to rewatch it. I remember liking it well enough and really enjoying some of the performances. But describing it as the most French movie ever is super true, because it's just like everybody is just politically activated and having affairs and drinking and very high culture. And it's just like, is this like a parody or something?
Right. And there's also there's this sort of running gag about Michael Haneke, his movie White Ribbon. So it's like a very sort of, I don't know, it's going for a very specific thing and is about and perhaps catered to a specific class and type of person. But I think that it's genuinely funny in places, and I think it's maybe a comedy of manners or something. I don't know.
That'd be a good way to describe it.
Comedy of errors.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it should be probably going a little bit wider soon, but check out.
Yeah, and I just filed my review of it for the Nashville scene because it opens in Nashville next week. So it will be slowly, I think, creeping across the country throughout the summer.
Very neat. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back talking 1942's King's Row after this.
Hey, Cinematary listeners, Andrew here. During this break in the show, I'd like to mention that Cinematary does want your money. You can give us your money at patreon.com/cinematary, where you can chip in a small fee of about $5 a month, the price of a fancy coffee, in exchange for shout outs in every episode, the opportunity to choose movies we cover on the show, and bonus episodes every month in which we talk about more movies as well as other miscellaneous stuff. In the past, we've just been humbly asking for you to share the show and engage with us, and we would still love for you to do those things. You can tweet us at Cinematary, send us an email, zach@cinematary.com, leave us a review on iTunes, all that stuff. But Cinematary has grown a ton in the past few years due to the hard work of a bunch of writers, myself included, who haven't been paid for their labor, which is sadly a pretty normal thing. We record things and write things for free, you listen to and read them for free, and the only people getting paid are Apple and Google, which is depressing. So, if you appreciate what we do, if you feel like there's some sort of value being exchanged here and you'd like more of it, help us normalize paying people by going to patreon.com/cinematary and chipping in $5 a month. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
Back with part 2 of episode 249 of Cinematary. In this part, as part of our Patreon Picks series, we're going to be watching 1942's King's Row, as picked by Maggie. It was directed by Sam Wood from a script by Casey Robinson and based on the novel of the same name by Henry Bellamy. And in the 1890s, friends from both sides of the tracks in the village of Kings Row look for love despite the barriers of family and class. Aspiring Dr. Paris Mitchell loves the mysterious Cassandra Tower despite her dark family secrets. Drake McHugh loses his trust fund and must go to work, but when his legs are amputated after an accident, his depression colors his relationship with feisty working class girl Randy Monahan. 20th Century Fox originally sought to buy Bellamy's novel as a vehicle for Henry Fonda. Philip Reed, Rex Downing, and Tyrone Power were considered for the role of Paris. Producer Hal B. Wallace borrowed Robert Cummings from Universal Studios when 20th Century Fox refused to lend Power. Ida Lupino, Olivia de Havilland, and Ginger Rogers were initially considered for the role of Cassandra. Sam Wood pushed hard for Lupino, saying that she, quote, has a natural something that Cassie should have. Wood believed that de Havilland, who turned down the role, was too mature for the part, and Lupino also turned it down despite Wallace's emphatic argument saying that it was, quote, beneath her as an artist. Betty Davis wanted the part, but the studio was against it because it was believed that she would dominate the movie, and Davis later suggested Betty Field. Among the other actresses considered for Cassandra were Katharine Hepburn, Adele Longmire, Marcia Hunt, Lorraine Day, Susan Peters, Joan Leslie, Jean Tierney, and Priscilla Lane. Before Ronald Reagan was cast in the role, John Garfield was considered for the role of Drake McHugh, as well as Dennis Morgan, Eddie Albert, Robert Preston, and Francois Tone. Although Reagan became a star as a result of his performance, he was unable to capitalize on his success because he was drafted into the U.S. Army to serve in World War II. He never regained the star status that he had achieved from his performance in the film. Instead, later went on to destroy the country. Wolfgang Reinhardt turned down an assignment to produce the film, saying, quote, as far as plot is concerned, the material in King's Row is for the most part either censorable or too gruesome and depressing to be used. The hero finding out that his girl has been carrying on incestuous relations with her father, a host of moronic and other mentally diseased characters, people dying from cancer, suicides. These are principal elements of the story. The pivotal scene in which Drake McHugh wakes up to find his legs amputated posed an acting challenge for Reagan, who was supposed to say, "Where's the rest of me?" in a convincing fashion. In City of Nets, Otto Friedrich noted that the film had a formidable array of acting talent, and that the scene in which he saw that his legs were gone was his, quote, one great opportunity. Reagan recalled in his memoir that he had, quote, neither the experience nor the talent to fake it, so he carried out exhaustive research, talking to disabled people and doctors, and practicing the line every chance he got. Joseph Breen, director of the Production Code Authority, which administered the Hays Code, wrote the producers that, quote, to attempt to translate such a story to the screen, even though it be rewritten to conform to the provisions of the Production Code, is, in our judgment, a very questionable undertaking from the standpoint of the good and welfare of this industry. Breen objected to, quote, illicit sexual relationships between characters in the movie, quote, without sufficient compensating moral values, and also objected to, quote, the general suggestion of loose sex, which carries through the entire script. Breen also voiced concern about the characterization of Cassandra, who is the victim of incest with her father in the novel, as well as the mercy killing of the grandmother by Paris, also depicted in the novel, and, quote, the sadistic characterization of Dr. Gordon. The film begins with a billboard promoting Kings Row as, quote, a good town, a good clean town, a good town to live in, and a good place to raise your children.
Why?
In his book, City of Nets, author Otto Friedrich says that beneath the tranquil small town exterior was a, quote, roiling inferno of fraud, corruption, treachery, hypocrisy, class warfare, and ill-suppressed sex of all varieties, adultery, sadism, homosexuality, and incest. In 1955, Warner Brothers planned a remake of the film with Montgomery Clift, Frank Sinatra, Eva Marie Saint, and Ronald Reagan reprising his original role, but it was never made. The New York Times said just why the Warners attempted a picture of this sort in these times, and just why the corps of high-priced artists which they employed for it did such a bungling job. On that note, let's talk a little bit about Kings Row. The first thing I wanted to talk about is it's kind of it tries to be this somewhat sprawling American epic of the story of the people in this town, and it's a very interesting choice in director to have Sam Wood, who I feel like is best known for directing Marx Brothers comedies, directing such epic. What did you make of the look of the movie? I mean, just in terms of, going back to our previous series that we did and looking at stuff like To Kill a Mockingbird in terms of trying to like portray this deeply American town. What did you make of Sam Wood's direction and kind of how he creates King's Row?
I actually think he got very good performances out of the child actors. Which is surprising coming from me. I feel like this movie is kind of, I don't know how this fits into Sam Wood's sensibilities at all, but and it's not, it's missing something. I think it really wants to be like Southern Gothic, like kind of a small town life, but underneath it's all fucked up. But this is a Midwest or a New England town.
Yeah, it feels like it should be trying to be more like Magnificent Ambersons or Meet Me in St. Louis rather than something Southern Gothic.
It would almost reminded me of Our Town, but with a blue velvet. Here's how fucked up the quaint little American city is. Or not city, town. Why did I say city?
The other thing I definitely thought, especially because of that billboard, although it didn't say it in those words, I was like, oh, this is a sundown town. No black people live here. There are some maids, but that doesn't count. The sign didn't say it, but 100% it would have.
Well, on the note of the look of the movie, I was honestly, Lydia, you mentioned the performances, and the performances of the children were a little weird. There was a really intense precociousness to them, but at the same time, I sort of
it was way better than Mockingbird.
Yeah, I enjoyed that because the children just felt very energetic and they felt. I had this sense of these are kids, but they have these very real feelings and lives and personal histories, when Cassie comes up crying and she's just sobbing about having to stay at home forever. I just felt like a kind of a really real person there, and I also thought that I was rather impressed for the most part during that sequence. I mean, throughout the film, it's not a bad looking film, but really during the opening sequence, there's that kind of maybe the opening shot, or at least an early shot where it's just sort of tracking down this street, showing all these houses.
Like a wagon.
Yeah. And, I didn't know beforehand, but noticed in the opening credits that it's shot by James Wong Howe, who of course, did so many movies like Yankee Doodle Dandy and Seconds and HUD and The Thin Man and Babyface and just so many movies, across decades of Hollywood. So I feel like it's for the most part a pretty good looking movie, but it's just once it jumps to adulthood, it's just loses a little bit, I think, in the qualities of the characters and the performances. It's weird to think of children being better than adults, but
I know.
I kind of, at least for the main leads, I sort of felt that way.
100%.
Well, Robert Cummings is just so milquetoast bland as Parrish Mitchell. Then you have the
really good as that character.
Yeah, the women characters are just not given anything to do really, and then Ronald Reagan is trying to do his best Jimmy Stewart impression or something. I don't know what he's kind of trying to do here or trying to evoke. It was one of those where I immediately was kind of shut off to what was happening in this movie, just because, kind of like you were mentioning at the beginning, Lydia, it is just this very white town. It's just these very upper middle class, we're just gonna get on this again, upper middle class white people, and you have kind of this dark underbelly. But you mentioned that scene where Paris runs over and sees Cassie crying, and just the way that he reacts, and when she's saying, "Oh, I'm not going to be at school anymore," is not, that's awful for you. It's, well, what about, you're not going to be able to walk home with me, and we're not going to be able to do this and do this and this.
That's very consistent with his character for the rest of the story.
And it's
what a selfish little bitch.
Like, it's just like, that just seems to be the consistency through the movie is, especially with like the Cassie character, she's, having to fight really deeply disturbing things. Of course they're putting it kind of behind the code. Yeah, that's I was looking for in this one. But at the same time, I just didn't feel like she was given much to like. She just wasn't given much to work with. Lydia, you were gonna say something?
Well, even without like this movie, I don't know, does not understand psychology, and like, I know it's depicting a time when Freud was a new idea, but like, just Jesus Christ, you lock a kid up, they're gonna be weird. It doesn't matter if like mental illness runs in your family. There's some like nature nurture stuff, and like, that's a bad nurturing environment. So even without the like code, like kneecapping, I guess, what they were allowed to depict, I was like, no, it's pretty fucked up. I'm uncomfortable.
It's and it's also just, I felt like it was a very strange narrative structure, how it sort of just kind of meanders,
Well, halfway through, Reagan's the main character again, like, suddenly.
Right, it's this sort of like casual strolling, like small town quality, but just about how like everything is terrible and messed up for all these people, and how they all just like, you have terrible things happen to them. And Paris, like you said, disappears like halfway through the movie, basically, and Ronald Reagan becomes the main character. And then it just becomes kind of this like second movie where he, loses all his money and becomes a bum. Which, like, by the time you get to the end, it's like, I had sort of, started to forget so much of the stuff with Cassie and, the like, potential incest and abuse and all this stuff that has like, is really heavy stuff, and it's just like totally forgotten about and glossed over. And it's
he lost his leg.
I'm just kind of like, I don't. Yeah, I just like don't quite, even beyond, like knowing that it was, sort of censored and toned down and blah blah blah. I just kind of wonder like what the general intention was here. Was Sam Wood like trying to prove something, like prove that he could do something incredibly serious?
I mean, that's what it kind of reads to me as. Is like, that's why I made the comparison to something like To Kill a Mockingbird, where it just wants to be like this very important moment movie where it's like saying all this important stuff, and it's really like capturing all of the dark underbelly of this town. And I just feel like it's completely missing the mark on all of that. It's you.
Well,
like,
I think
the
because it moved away from the kids, right? Like, you're too old to not know that life is sad and like messed up things happen.
well, you can be sheltered enough in the town with the billboard that says this is a great town, a good clean town.
No black people live there.
Yeah, like of course they learn. Oh, life's hard because what really was anybody outside of Cassie having to overcome up to that point? And that's why it's just kind of like she is she's dealing with something awful, but she's so second nature in terms of where the plot's going.
This movie has... sorry, Nathan.
No, go ahead.
I mean, this movie has like two abusive father-daughter relationships, because there's the other doctor in town who threatens to like send his girl to an insane asylum because she wants to rat out his abusive practices as a doctor. And just like, the movie doesn't give a shit about her either, because the climax is Paris like seriously considering, is the right thing to do to send this innocent woman to an insane asylum? No. This is not a moral dilemma. What are you talking about?
Let's sit and think on it.
Also, I don't know about you guys, but there were some serious homoeroticism going off between Paris and Drake. I mean, when Paris shows up, returns from his studies in Vienna with Freud, or like a Freud stand-in. They're like, he comes home and sees Ronald Reagan in bed, and their faces are so close, and they like kind of look at each other and sort of not really embrace each other, but sort of grab each other for a little bit, and it's like a long time, and they just sort of really linger on them throughout the movie. I mean, even when they're kids, they're very honestly, affectionate. Like Paris is like putting his arm, Drake is putting his arm around Paris and stuff, and like, I'm gonna show you around, like, and it's just a little like too, I don't know, it's just like there's something. I mean, it makes sense that Paris falls in love with like a girl who's totally unavailable because her dad locked her out. It's like, well, if you're not really sure you're into girls, like that's a very safe crush to have.
He's like, I'll jump in on the incest family because then I don't really have to.
Holy shit! That made me so mad too. I'm like, he's not a good dad. He's not a good doctor. Paris, stop it.
I'll learn some things from him.
Dr. Towers is objectively a shitty doctor.
They have terrible medical professions in this town. Nathan, I'm curious to get a little bit more perspective on Reagan, because I know you just recently read Jay Hoberman's book about Reagan and his acting career. And this one, like I mentioned before, it seems like this is one that people cite as kind of like the turning point for him as possibly being a star. What did Jay Hoberman have to say about this in his book?
Yeah, this new book is actually coming out in July. I was fortunate enough to snag an advanced copy, and it's called Make My Day: Movie Culture in the Age of Reagan, and it's basically both about films sort of during Reagan's various presidential campaigns during the 70s and then his eventual presidency during the 80s. It's about the movies during that time, American movies, but it's also about Reagan's career in Hollywood, and devotes some space to his own movies. And King's Row comes up again and again. Like you said, it's the kind of movie that made him more of a serious actor. He proved himself a little bit more dramatically here, and it's one that was really remembered. I mean, kind of one like really weird anecdote, kind of not anecdote, but just piece of information is that his iconic line in this movie, "Where's the rest of me," was the title of a memoir that he released in the 1960s, I think. So it's just sort of strange, like how that this really disturbing movie is kind of roped into the Reagan mythology. I mean, the movie score was performed at his inauguration. According to Wikipedia, there is no citation here, but according to Wikipedia, John Williams drew inspiration from this film's soundtrack for his famous Star Wars theme. Don't know, if that is true or not. But, it has this sort of enduring legacy. And it's also a movie that Reagan showed to other people, like at the White House in Camp David, when he had visiting luminaries or dignitaries from other countries, and he wanted to entertain them with one of his old movies. This is often one that he would show. And so it's just like, it's so weird, I mean, the bedtime, people always with Reagan, the thing they go to, I think the two movie things they go to are Bedtime for Bonzo, the movie where he's hanging around with a chimpanzee, and Don Siegel's The Killers, which was, I believe, his last movie, and the only one in which he plays a villain. And there's a scene where Lee Marvin slaps him. So those are two of the things that get brought up a lot with Reagan in movies. But King's Row is sort of even more than those was like Reagan's sort of personal propaganda, you know, like this is my great achievement as an artist and actor, and I'm going to hold it up and reference it and bring it up again and again to sort of like show how good I am. Because I mean, kind of before then, and just generally like throughout his career, I mean, even Reagan himself acknowledged that his persona was quote unquote Mr. Norm, that, you know, he was just like a regular average guy, and that was his persona, and that he could not really do anything beyond that. And so this is, I mean, even here, like for a lot of the movie, he's not really doing anything beyond that. It's only until he has his money taken away and loses his legs, like until somebody does something to him. You know, he's not a very like active character. He's just sort of reactive, you know. And I feel like that's kind of Reagan as an actor. You know, he's not like, doesn't have a whole lot of dramatic momentum to his persona innately. He just sort of like, you know, I don't know. He's just there. He just responds to people, and that's it.
On an unrelated note, do you think that Trump does that, but like shows old episodes of like The Apprentice?
Oh man! I mean, he could show, you know, like Home Alone 2.
Yeah.
But like just that scene, and then it just cuts off. Yeah. That is interesting because I think that you make a good point where he as a character is pretty nondescript until like literally his character trait is I'm poor now and I lost my legs, which again goes back to the point we were making of he and Paris as characters just I don't know, there's nothing very descriptive about them. They're just very privileged, sheltered boys who are now men who are kind of continuing that cycle. And I think that's what, honestly, I just found this movie to be aggressively boring because I was just like, this again.
I feel really bad for Anne Sheridan's character. Like, she had to kiss Reagan, and also she's great and was not paired with an equal partner.
No, not at all. Like I feel like just her screen presence innately is like a lot more powerful and than his, you know, like really the only sort of thing that he has to make himself interesting is his hat.
Well, he does this like thing, like clicking noise, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I'm just like, stop doing that.
I think that was I initially sent a Snapchat to Lydia and was like, Ronald Reagan does this little like Twitch click thing with his mouth and it's awful. And he does it all the time.
The whole movie.
And he thinks it's cute and it's not. Nobody likes it. It's awful.
Because he's rich, nobody's told him, hey, that's annoying.
They're like, hey, shut the fuck up.
You know what I was just sort of wondering about this movie? I was thinking, you know, like being adapted from a novel that had come out not too long before it was produced and released. You know, I kind of wonder, you know, I feel like there are probably, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but I feel like there are maybe more recent examples of movies that are adapted from really like popular hot books, you know, best-selling books, but then those sort of books that are popular like upon release sort of fade over time, and then the adaptations of those books don't seem very good in retrospect. And I was just kind of, this isn't an adaptation, but it sort of led me down this thought path, wondering, do you think King's Row in 1942 was sort of like Sam Wood's Green Book? You know, like Peter Farrelly sort of coming off decades of Dumb and Dumber, and Shallow Hal was like, I've got to make an Oscar movie. Do you think Sam Wood was like, fuck the Marx Brothers, we are winning some awards?
Did this get any?
I like that. I love that. I like that theory a lot, actually.
Did this get any awards play?
Let's see.
Yeah, no, it was nominated for Academy Awards. I'll pull it up
really
real quickly.
Good theory, Nathan.
Best director and best picture. Which I feel like this does seem like the sort of, you know, like, I mean, you look at so many of the Oscar nominees from decades past, and they're, of course, like, you kind of scratch your head and are like, what? Like, you know, And this seems exactly like that. Like it's sort of, you know, an adaptation, prestige, has all this talent, you know, Claude Rains, but like, you know, nobody was watching this probably, you know, you know, well, I guess they were watching it because of Ronald Reagan. But if Ronald Reagan had never become president, I don't know how often we would be seeing this movie around.
Well, I was kind of wondering if this has any sort of cult appeal, like beyond just like Ronald Reagan as kind of a weird star president, and it's just kind of a weird, really long, fucked up movie. Like, is there a small neat, just like, oh, it's this weird movie, you should check it out because it's messed up and it's got young Ronald Reagan. Like, I don't know what the audience for that is.
You were sending us a message before we recorded talking about like is there like a camp factor to this movie? I mean, what did you make of that when you were thinking of that? Do you feel like there's a camp factor in this, that there's almost just like this overplayedness of the at least of the characters and how they're kind of reacting to stuff?
Well, I was definitely thinking the Cassandra Betty Field character, like when she's in the throes of her adult mental illness, just like screaming and having these like really upsetting monologues. I was like, is this camp? I'm not sure the answer is yes, because I think this movie thinks it's doing a very good job of like being serious. I don't know. I don't know if this movie has been reclaimed in that way.
I feel like, you know, when you proposed that question earlier, I was thinking about it, and I feel like there are definitely like camp elements here. I mean, just the sort of the emphasis to begin with on all these like deviant, like immoral things going on in this seemingly quaint place. You know, I feel like a lot of, maybe this is just my own assessment, I don't know if other people would agree, but I feel like a lot of movies that are considered campy or otherwise become sort of cult films often have two sort of elements that like contradict or clash with each other that are sort of pushed together. So the fact that this, you know, is this movie about this quaint, innocent, clean town where everybody's like abusing each other and having incest, and there are all these like suppressed gay feelings too, you know, like that you have these sort of things in tension with each other, I feel like sort of sets it up maybe for that kind of appeal, in addition to the fact that it's Ronald Reagan and some just, you know, just like other, you know, Ann Sheridan, Claude Rains, Charles Coburn, you know, they're all like, you know, they're all familiar faces from the old Hollywood repertoire. So they're all stars, but not in like a successful, famous movie. So I feel like it's like it has those contrasting tensions. It has the presence of star power, but not like the full, like real, authentic thing, and some weird historical anecdotes. I feel like it has some of it, but it's not a full.
Like the intention's not there, and I feel like there is maybe not as it was originally conceptualized camp, but like now when you think of campy, there's some sort of like intentionality to it, and like this did not mean to. I really don't believe it did.
No, this movie really believed in itself, I think.
Anything else before we wrap up?
I want to know where the rest of me is. I've been asking myself that my whole life.
Well, it's what did he get run over by? Was it like a train or?
Or it was like what? Yeah, some stuff fell on next to the railroad. I don't know.
It was a train.
It seemed kind of vague.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Who knows where the rest of you are, Ronald Reagan? I don't give a shit.
They're like metal bars. I don't know.
He's in the rest of. I can tell you where it is. It's in the ground, 6 feet under in the earth.
Yeah, he's fucking dead.
In hell.
He's dead.
The rest of you is in hell, Ronald
Reagan. He's trickling down into hell. That's what he's doing.
Wow.
Don't piss the
That's a good one.
All right. Well, Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Also, a big thank you to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Christopher Metcalf, Maggie, Matthew Lingo, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. We very much appreciate you supporting the website and show. We're going to be getting ready for our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series in a couple weeks, but first we hit episode 250, and so that means a nice don't worry, we're not gonna get drunk this time. That was not good for anybody. We might do that again, but like it was
not recorded.
Yeah, that might just be for the patrons. But we're gonna do a movie swap like we've done in the past, so please, if you've listened to the other, the 50 or 100 or 150 or 200, you probably have a sense of what we'll be doing for this 251. But yeah, if you are not on Patreon yet, please consider supporting Cinematary. We're about to get ready to record a special. We're going to be doing a book club. So if you are reading any movie-related books or essays or anything related to the world of film and all of that stuff, we're going to be doing that throughout the at least for the extended period of time, indefinitely. And so join our film book club on Patreon. So nice little plug if you're interested in supporting that. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.